So, a percent. Oh, I'm gonna put an F. You got me all confused, Wilbur.
You know what the W is, though. That's my fault.
Alright, a percent. So basically we're going to have, this is really a ratio out of, what would we base all of our grades on? 100, right? Ratio out of 100. So again, if it's a ratio out of 100, what are we gonna do? Make a what? A ratio is a what?
Fraction.
A fraction, right? So we're gonna make a fraction, and if it's out of 100, where would 100 be? On the bottom, okay? So the first thing we're going to look at switching a lot of things, we're going to take a percent and we're going to turn it into a fraction. So what do? If I have a percent and I want to turn it into a fraction.
Put it over 100 and then reduce.
Perfect. But the percent over 100 and reduce. Is that correct? Okay. So what do we mean? Obviously, by reducing, we want to make sure that it's the smallest that it possibly can. All right. So we're going to find a common term in both of those numbers and take that or divide it out. All right. The ones that give some people a little bit kind of bother is if the percent is a decimal. So if I had something like 0.3%, why would I have 0.3% of something? Where would you see 0.3% in normal life?
Milk.
No, that would be 2%. What? Okay, maybe an ethnic group in a certain portion of the world. Okay, that's a good one. What else?
How much percent of like a percent of vitamins in like a food?
Okay, maybe yeah. So if you broke down the calcium in the good one. Ingredients. That's a good one for it. Okay. What else?
Percentage of minerals in water.
Okay. All right. How does our water get broken down? Maybe in banking, right? If you have 0.3% interest, are you making a whole lot of money? Probably not, but it's better than nothing, right? So when you do this right here, we're still going to take that number and put it over 100. But basically then, we never want to have a decimal in our fraction. So we're going to move our decimal one place to make it into a whole number. But then whatever I do on the top, I also got to make sure that I do it on the bottom. So my fraction turns into 3 over 1,000. Okay. Now, if this would have been more than just one decimal place, then I move it that many times and I include another 0 on the bottom. That makes sense? So for whatever reason that happens to confuse some people. And then don't forget that we could always have over 100%. So if we had, 105 over 100, we can always have that too, right? And why would we have something over 100%?
Like if you have
Extra credit? What else?
Effort.
Effort, maybe. Can't really judge effort, but maybe. What else could we have? Why else would we have a percentage over 100? Or what other circumstance? If you think about production, if you were in a business that you were building something, and your goal was 50 things, but you made, or your team made 52 things, then you would have a greater percentage, right? Okay. But again, don't forget to reduce here. So the same rules. If I take 5 out of both, what do we end up with? 21 over 20?
That's how many brain cells I make you lose with 100 brain cells.
You're telling me.
I mean, don't we have?
I use 100 brain cells and you guys lose 105.
So let's, look at, this one right here too. 12.5%. If we wanna take that and turn it into a fraction, the first thing that I'm going to do is turn this into a decimal of 12.5%. And now I'm gonna do the same thing, right? 12.5 over 100. But again, we don't want a decimal in it, so we move the decimal one place. But when we do that, we also have to move the decimal one place on the bottom. So what can I take out of both 125 and 100? 25, right? So now we're thinking about quarters, right? How many quarters are in $1.25?
5.
Still 5. How many quarters are in $10?
20.
What?
Whoops. That's
So did we get enough? Nope. So we end up with
1/8.
20.
1 over 8. Okay? So again, we're looking for fractions. Okay? Any questions there? Okay, the next thing then that we try to do is take a fraction and turn it into a percent. What do I do if I have a fraction, 4/5, and I want to turn it into a percent?
Find out like what you can multiply your denominator by and get to 100.
Okay,
Give the same to the top.
so we could really just turn this into what?
100.
We could put 100 like this and make it a proportion, right? And then if we solved our proportion, like we've been doing, we'd take 4 times 100, which is
400.
divided by 5, is 80. And if anything over 100, that tells us that it's a percent. So I can always set up a proportion, right? Any other way that you would know how to turn 4/5 into a percent?
Multiply some number by 5 to get to 100, and then multiply that same number by 4. Like multiply.
Why are you multiplying by 5 though?
Multiply 5 by a number to get to 100.
Oh, yeah, essentially that's kind of what we just did here. What else could we do? Another way that I could do this is I could divide the numerator by the denominator. Because remember, division is shown by a ratio, right? So if I divide this, what would I get? If I divide this, I would get 0.8. If I would punch 4 divided by 5 into my calculator. Okay? But then, so we're going to divide the numerator, and then we're going to what? Move the decimal 2 places, which way? Yep. So this will always work also. So we go 1, 2, and then fill in that spot, and we still get 80%. So it's just a different way of doing it, whichever way you want. So basically, you can set up the straight proportion. You can think about what Caleb said. How do I get from 5 to 100? And then I'm going to do that same number on top. We just did it a different way with the proportion, but essentially that was the same way. And then you can always divide and move the decimal.
Could we just do that mentally?
Well, yeah, but what happens if it's 6 over 11?
Then you can't.
Easy though.
Okay? So, either way, totally however you remember to do it. Okay? Any questions there? Do you need to see more examples of those kind? Anybody? We can do more of those. Those are ones that you might want to use your calculator because some of them might be a little bit more difficult to do your division. And then you got to make sure that you read the directions to see what you would round your percentages to. Okay? For whatever reason, we're not very good at rounding as a school. I don't know why. So, when we're talking about decimal places, what's the first place after the decimal? Tenths, then what?
Hundreds, thousands, 10,000.
Okay, so when they say round to the hundredths place, we're gonna round to two places, right? But we really look to the third place. We use the third place to change that second place number, okay? For whatever reason, we don't do very well, like I said, as a school, okay? Any questions there? Okay, so the next thing we want to try to do is a percent to a decimal, but we kind of just talked about this.
Or you just move the decimal places over too.
Exactly right. So if we have a percent, 60%, and we want to make it into a decimal, what are we going to do?
Move it two places to the left.
2 places to the left.
Or divide by 100.
We're going to divide it by 100. And
600. No, 6 tenths.
6/10. Or we just move 2 places to the left. 2 places to the left this time. So if I take my decimal and move it 2 places to the left, now we're right back to that 0.6. So again, nothing real challenging. But remember now, the ones that again kind of confuse people are when there's a decimal in the problem. So if I have a decimal as a percent, I still have to move it 2 places to the left. And again, why are we moving it 2 places?
To get it to 100.
Because everything's based off of the number 100. Exactly right. So when we move this 2 places to the left, my decimal answer is what?
0.004.
0.004, right? So just don't forget that if their original problem has a decimal, don't let that confuse you. And then obviously if I have a really big percentage, so 658%, when I turn this into a decimal, we actually end up with the decimal answer, right? So again, you have to know where your decimal point is, and we're moving it 2 places to the left, so my decimal is 6.58. So sometimes these ones right here, the ones that are really, really small or really, really big, confuse people too. So take your time and look at it. Any questions there? So then how do I take a decimal to a percent?
Times 100. Or just move it.
Yeah. So you're timesing by 100, and we already kind of looked at that over here, right? Kind of already looked at that. Taking it and moving it 2 places to the right. Again, you probably don't have to write that one down because that one's probably the one you've done the most. But realistically, it's what Alexander said, right? The reason we're doing that, moving that decimal 2 places to the right, is because we want to base everything off of that number 100. All right. Now the ones again that confuse us a little bit would be when we have a number like this, a really small decimal, right? So if I have this decimal and I want to move it to a percent, what's my percent?
0.08%.
Yeah, so this is the one that's kind of confusing. But I end up with 0.08%. So again, if I go back to our banking system here and say if this is my interest rate that I'm getting, I'm not making any money really, right? This would be the percent we would want if we got a loan, right? Because then we'd have to pay back that interest. So that would be good for us. So the ones that are really small, just make sure that you move it the right amount. It doesn't matter if it includes regular numbers or zeros. So this one we would say what? 23.7%. Now again, if it's should have a percentage sign, make sure you write your percentage sign. So don't leave that off. That'd be the same thing as not having a label. All right. So a lot of this, like I said today, is probably a lot of review for you. You've done all that kind of stuff. But you just gotta slow yourself down, don't get going too fast in the homework, and continue to do the same thing when they actually switch gears. Meaning, read the directions. And read the directions to see if they tell you what to round to. Okay?
What's this reading you speak of?
Don't even ask.
Questions?
It says think and ask.
So, you get 15 minutes to work on your assignment.